Worcester area, Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, NAACP, NAACP-Worcester branch, and the Voter Registration Initiative Group, which is, some of you may not know, is a youth group, or actually an adult group that was started here in Worcester, and they've been working basically all summer trying, tabling and getting people to register to vote. And we had the pleasure of having them here with us this summer at the YWCA. So welcome to our one of three candidates forum, Worcester Renaissance, centering equity in a time of change. Tonight is our district contested race. Last night we had our first one, which was the City Council at large. Your moderators this evening are Attorney Ruby Wabu, was born in Ghana, grew up in Worcester. She graduated from South High, Simmons University with a Bachelor's of Science in Political Science and Economics. She is also a graduate of Suffolk University Law School. Attorney Wabu is currently an Assistant District Attorney in the Office of District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. Attorney Wabu also serves on the board of the YWCA of Central Mass, on the City's Advisory Committee on the Status of Women, and co-chairs of the Worcester County Bar Association Committee for Anti-Racism and Equality. So Sophie Marani is our own marketing and resource development associate here at the YWCA of Central Massachusetts. She graduated from Western New England University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Public Relations and Journalism. In 2018, she received the distinction of being one of the university's top 100 alumni, students, or faculty of the past 100 years. As a marketing professional, Sophie has worked in a variety of industries ranging from higher education to real estate development. Now working in the nonprofit sector, Sophie is learning to use a racial and gender equity lens to develop marketing best practices within the industry. We will ask each of the candidates to introduce themselves. You will have 90 seconds. And before we go into that, I will let folks know that when you please use the microphone, shut it off, because if not, it's going to make a not too pleasant noise. And also, when you move your mask if you're comfortable, so that your answers are more clearly. I would say the same thing for the moderators. We will be giving time cards. I don't know if I will actually be able to use this evening, but you'll be given a 30-second notice once you are going into your minute and a half. Bathrooms are out there. If anyone needs to use them, they're straight across the hall. And we ask you to enjoy the evening. So I will start with giving each one of you, and starting with Councilor Rose, 90 seconds to introduce yourself, and then go down the line. Back this way. Thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. I want to thank the YWCA, the NAACP, League of Women Voters, and others for having us here today, and thank you for those of you here in the audience and those of you watching or streaming online. I ran in 2017, and the goal and the motivation of me running in 2017 was to make this city a better place for my daughters to come back and live and raise their children in the city where they grew up in the same way that my wife did. This time around, I'm afraid I'm running for something a little bit different. There's been so much divisiveness around our country that's permeated into our city. And it's been something that is very concerning. My hope in this third term is to work to bring people together. I've always said, and some of you may have heard this before, that the role of a city councilor is not to be an expert in any one thing, except being an expert in partnering with others to accomplish goals to improve the quality of life of people in our district and the city. We've made a lot of momentum over the last 2 terms that I've been in for the city as it relates to social injustice, development, taking care of our vulnerable populations, addressing the challenges of COVID. And this is a district race that is very contested, and it's a race that is very important. Our values, our democratic values, are very, very much on the line. And I can't reiterate enough how important it is for us to maintain them here in the city, given all the positive momentum that we've had and the potential for that to fall apart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Rose. Thank you to YWCA, the League of Women Voters, and NAACP for co-sponsoring, and all of you who came out, and to those watching. My story is the story of many other families that share the experience of fleeing their home countries, and not because it was their choice, because we were forced due to political violence. It's what I did 22 years ago with my mom, my dad, and my 85-year grandmother. I am really proud that 24 years later, I'm standing here making my second bid for Worcester City Council for District 5. As a proud Albanian American, as a proud mom of 2 beautiful boys, and a community worker. In the past few months, I have knocked on thousands of doors across the district to hear what my neighbors' concerns, hopes, and dreams are for a better city. I have had the opportunity to share with them how my experience, and my life experience, and my work experience, and experience as a community activist has brought me to this place. I have mentored young people, worked in our city shelters, worked as a legal advocate for the community, and I have advocated for racial and gender equity as a board member of the YWCA. I have the experience, understanding of issues, work ethic, and competence to lead with solutions rooted in data, best practices, racial and gender equity. I believe that no matter where we come from, what neighborhood we live in, what's in our wallets, we all deserve to have our voices included in community planning. And more than ever, I think, as Councilor Rose mentioned, we need leaders who have the experience and the commitment to lead collaboratively, inclusively, with a racial and gender equity lens, to make sure that the city and the district are truly livable, greener, healthier, and safer for everyone, where mom and pop shops have the ability to thrive, and where we offer affordable housing opportunities for all people at all different income levels. It's time we elect people with forward-looking vision, for whom racial and gender equity is a starting point and not an afterthought. And so if elected, I look forward to partnering with all of you and everyone to put forward that vision. Thank you.
There we go. My name is Johanna Hampton Dance, from Worcester, born in Boston, raised in Worcester. I've been in Worcester today, as of today, 44 years. I decided to run because I represent the everyday person. I am not a politician and I am not polished, but I speak the truth. I know what is needing to be done. I talk to people every day, from elderly down to school age, and the whole point in me running is to be their microphone and really amplify their voices and their concerns. It's been far too long that the people have not been heard, no matter how many times they call in or write letters and emails, and that needs to change. ETEL is running on equity and equality, and I think Sean Rose is too, and we all represent that, and that's been a major part missing from this council for too long. So it put the fire underneath me, and I decided to run. I've never ran for an office or anything like that, but I do believe that I can accomplish some things because I'm unafraid and I refuse to be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. So our first question is submitted by the YWCA. And the question is, how will you support creating better outcomes and equitable access for women and people of color-owned businesses that contract with the city? Yes, Adele.
Before the ballpark, or in the process when the ballpark was announced, I had the opportunity to work with the Worcester Community Labor Coalition to push for good numbers in hiring for women, for veterans, for people of color. I'm happy that our city actually, the hiring numbers listed in the TIF policy are better than Boston, and that's the way it should be. We should be taking the lead as the second largest city in New England to lead by example in how we think about equity. I think that the pandemic has definitely raised questions around really how much truly are we looking at equity. I would love to do an audit of our bidding processes. I would look to do an equity audit of our purchasing to see where the numbers in contracting, folks that are contracting with the city are falling in the lines that we want them to be in regards to women and people of color. I know Boston is doing it. There's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it. I do think too that we need to be very intentional about how we open gateways for people of color and women and veteran, and that doesn't end at just putting a line on the city's website. We need to open, be intentional, have outreach, have the right people do the outreach, and we need to also sit down and listen. What's missing from this process? For people of color-owned businesses, contractors, and women-owned businesses, and LGBTQ as well. We cannot talk about equity without listening to the people who are impacted by inequity. And so that would be my commitment when I get to City Council, is to ask questions, to make sure the process is transparent, and to make sure that we all know where our numbers are. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rose?
I first want to say I apologize for my opponent not being here. Everyone here looks, not nervous by anybody here, but then Fred just walked in, and so, I can see that. But on a serious note, I do think that, so I'm a small business owner. For those of you who may not be aware, I own a very small school in Puerto Rico that was built for young adults with failure to launch. And oftentimes there's opportunities for us to contract with other folks and jump into contracts to offer better resources for the program that and the clients and families that we serve. But I'm also the president and CEO of a nonprofit that works with disabled folks between the ages of 8 and 80. And I've found that being an exceptionally small nonprofit, that what happens is, we're going up against contracts of people, and I'm on Zooms with people looking for additional services or grants or foundation money or just contracting for services. And I look in the Zoom, and these people have like 6 or 7 different people on their teams. They have dedicated grant writers, and they have a number of people who are working on any one of these proposals. I think we really need to look at the bidding process very closely. I think we need to even the playing field with that. We have some of the most aggressive TIF policies as it relates to persons of color and veterans and women and residents, and I think we can use that as an opportunity to look at our bid process in a way that, just like our diversity policy and TIF policy, that, if all things being equal, it goes to one of those individuals. And so that is an area where I would really like to focus on. I want to even the playing field so that people have that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. I forgot to thank everybody for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. So Etel and Sean hit on some great points about bidding. It also comes down to making people aware that there are monies available, and getting that word out and coming up with a solution on how to get that word out, whether it's through community colleges or resource centers or places like the YWCA, letting them know that, hey, there's these resources sitting here, there's workshops on how to start a business, especially if you're a person of color, a woman of color, like, hop on it, you know what I mean? So that we can start creating some of that equity. It's one thing to say bidding and talk all these big words, but where do I start? As a normal person, I want to open a business, I want to sell soap. Where's the money for me to get the grant so I can sell soap? How do I start this business? I want to start a nonprofit. How do I do that? Who can teach me how to become a 503, right? Who can walk me through those steps? Where's the front door? So those are things we have to start considering and thinking about, and who can reach out and who they can reach out to. So that's where I personally would start. That's where I would like to see the ball start to roll, and providing those funds and direction and resources.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. This question was submitted by the NAACP-Worcester chapter. The ARPA funds received by the City of Worcester gives us a unique opportunity to address some of the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. What approach would you recommend the council adopt to determine priority areas to ensure equity? We'll start with Attell and then.
I appreciate that question a lot because it's the starting point for how we ensure that all of our communities are taken care of. The ARPA money specifically came to Worcester so that it could help uplift the communities that have been injured by the pandemic. Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, low-income families, the ones that I serve in the shelters, deserve to have the opportunity for us to make sure that we're uplifting them. The way that we have done it so far hasn't been what it's meant to be. And what I mean by that is that in the community listening sessions that I attended, and by the way, I co-chaired the Affordable Housing Coalition that's been pushing for 20% of all the ARPA money to go towards creating and preserving affordable housing, including retrofitting our aging stock so that our children can have a beautiful opportunity to live in healthy and not substandard housing. What I have seen personally is that the community hasn't been invited in the right way. We have prescribed notions of how we think this money should be used. The prescription should come from the community. This money is meant for our community. It's Worcester's money. I would recommend that Worcester City Council becomes a little bit louder in making sure that they're listening to their constituents. If elected, I would do that. I wouldn't do that to show that I'm a good listener. I would do that because it's the right thing to do. In the conversations that I've had with my colleagues in the community, with people who are struggling every day, they're disconnected from this process. And that's because one survey that we put out on the city's website is not enough to count as outreach. We need to spend this money in housing. We need to put shelter in place for people who need it. We need to make sure that we're taking care of food insecurity. And we need to make sure that we're building our infrastructure. And that starts with an equity lens, and it ends with an equity lens.
I have to agree with Attell. So, yeah, I've been really paying attention to the ARPA funds. And the fight is still on for 20% because right now it's only at 18.2. So it's not quite 20. We're a little shy. I do think that it should be a little bit more than 20% invested because we need buildings built. We need apartment buildings built, low income, affordable housing for people who are, number one, still stuck in shelters. Family shelters. There's no really single shelters out here. If you're a single person and you're homeless, you might not get a bed. So then what? Where do you go? Right? So there needs to be money set aside for that. We have lofts built. I think they're running for $2,500 a month. I can't afford that. Right? So what do? Where do I live? Right now, the rent increases that are happening in the city, people who are working full-time jobs, 40 hours a week, cannot afford. People are behind in their rent because of COVID, and landlords, now there's no moratorium, you gotta get out. So where's the funds to help find or pay for the back rent? You know, those are the things that I feel like the ARPA funds need to go towards. It goes deeper than that as far as like we need still more mental health and drug addiction treatments and things like that. But on the topic of housing, we have space, we can build a ballpark, we can build apartments, right? We can expand on what we already have. We can make sure that the funds are available, so if somebody does fall behind or they need to find a new place to live, they can call Central Mass Housing Alliance and the funds are available, right? So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm making sure when I get on the city council that that happens.
Thank you. So this question is submitted by the League of Women Voters, and we'll go with you, Joanna. So the question is, district councilors often hear specific complaints from their constituents regarding the need for infrastructure improvements such as streets and sidewalks, repairs, traffic and parking problems, snow removal, trash collection, use of community sports fields and parks, you know, those types of issues. What specific experience do you have that has prepared you to effectively and efficiently respond to these responsibilities?
Question. So, I'm not even on the council yet, and I have directed several people and assisted several people with issues from trash to potholes to falling on the city street and getting hurt, to being harassed in their neighborhood on what to do and what steps to take. I've been playing the background. But with the information that I provided them and the direction and the guidance, all it took was for me to listen and say, okay, so you tried this, this, and this, and it didn't work. Okay, so try these things. That's the whole point, is to listen and then put action behind it, you know, and provide transparency. Transparency. Like, we can say, okay, yeah, I'm going to take care of it all day long, and nothing gets done. Or there's no response, which happens a lot right now. Me, I plan on being accessible 24/7. You can text me, email me, call me. I'll answer, you know, and we'll work through it together. There's a lot of people, yes. It's going to be crazy and overwhelming, but I'm with that. I work best under pressure. So please do not hesitate. And again, this is all without even being on the council, making sure that things are getting done already. Thank you.
Obviously, I've never been elected to office. I hope I do on November 2nd. But what I have done, I have been a very long time organizer in the city. And one of the things that I have learned as an organizer, besides the fact that your job is to convene people and support other people's leadership, is that you learn a lot about the issues in the city. I have knocked on thousands of doors, both in 2019, well, over thousands of doors, in both in 2019 and this election cycle. And I have been able to talk to people about issues like traffic safety, you know, parents whose children have been almost killed by reckless driving. I have worked with mothers, currently as a volunteer, but formerly as an organizer of the local chapter Mothers Out Front, to sit down with utilities and have them pay or fix gas leaks that harm our children's health. I have a long record of convening coalitions and working with different people. And if going to council means that you work with people who disagree with you, that's the approach that I will take. I have to say that there's a lot of issues that constituents need. What I have heard on the doors over and over again, besides the infrastructure, besides the potholes and making our city safe, it's having a different way of thinking about safety, having a different way of thinking about public health, and having a different way of connecting all those issues that intersect both with inequities, of course, but also with each other. And what I mean by that is housing is safety, housing is health. We have to take care of all those things, and I have a proven record of doing that already.
Thank you.
So we'll now move to closing statements. As a reminder, you have 90 seconds, and we'll begin with Johanna.
Well, actually, since this has gone by so quickly,
Yeah, we have time. We have time.
and we had Councilor Sean Lowe step up, because I know he was EAW was having something, so he was responding to that. So we'd like to actually have some questions from the audience, if you have them, and we'll take them as they come. So this is very fortunate. We didn't do this last night because it was really time.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Taylor. I'm a Worcester resident, president of the NAACP-Worcester chapter. I've asked the at-large candidates a question at our candidates forum a couple of weeks ago about a civilian review board. We've heard a lot about the state and what the state's going to do in regards to a civilian review board. What the state is doing is crafting together policy recommendations. They're not requirements. I just want to hear from you folks if you support a civilian review board. If you do, why? And if you don't, why not? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Fred. I do support a Citizens Review Board. I've been very vocal about the support for a Citizens Review Board. The reason why we need a Citizens Review Board with subpoena power at that is because of the fact the police cannot police themselves. That's just a known fact. It's a known fact. and it's done on a biased level, and it's just been like a rinse and repeat process. There's been no real reprimand for bad behavior or misconduct, and it needs to be done by the citizens. They need to have a say, they need to be able to bring the issues to the forefront so everything can be corrected. We can weed out those bad apples, because we do want to have a police force that's respected and trusted and not feared, you know. And if we have to fear the police, I don't care if you're in Wichita or Worcester, it doesn't matter. If you fear the police, you're not going to call the police, especially if something is wrong, right? So we need to be able to hold them accountable for their misconduct. And we can't do that with police not holding other policemen accountable. Thank you.
I have been very clear 3 or 4 years ago that I supported and I support, and that was even before I ran for office, a civilian review board, and I stand by that. I think that in this city, we have gone long time without listening to the voices of Black and brown people. And so I heed the call of Black Families Together, Leon, and others who have been calling for a civilian review board. I think the executive order that the city manager put forward are good. We need to go further. In every institution, we expect accountability. Police shouldn't be excluded from that. I said in the District 5 forum that I also believe that we put way too much on police officers' shoulders. Their job and their job description should not include criminalizing folks experiencing homelessness. They shouldn't be called to take care of social issues that people like me and others in this room who have the expertise and the lived experience are best equipped to do. And so while I think definitely a civilian review board with subpoena power is absolutely needed, I do think that we need to get past this notion that we cannot talk about police accountability and that either you are for or against them. We have to get out of the mindset. We need to have our police officers and the police unit at the table, and we need to make sure that we're doing this with the best interest of the communities that are most impacted by police brutality.
This is a quick follow-up. So who do you imagine as would be the individuals on this, you know, board? Like who chooses who gets to be on this group of people to review this issue?
I think it should be a vetting process, but I also believe that it should be made up of the organizations that are at the forefront, from NAACP, MAACP, Black Families Together, you know, Interfaith. All of those community organizations that are pushing now for that equity and equality and to hold the police accountable where they need to be held accountable. I think, you know, each of those groups should have a representative to actually work side by side with the police to create this review board.
Estelle, just briefly.
Yeah, very briefly, I've heard the criticism before about the Civilian Review Board that somehow we can't have volunteers have the expertise to serve on boards. Well, we have boards and commissions, many of whom, or all of them, are staffed by volunteers. They do the business of the city, they allocate money. I do agree with Johanna, we need to elect, or we need to appoint people that first and foremost have the lived experience. That process should be done in a transparent way, in an accountable way, and it should be done with accountability, again, to the communities that have been most impacted by relationships with police.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience?
Before we move on, can we just repeat the question for Councilor Rose?
Sure.
Actually brought up.
Come up.
Oh, you like me to repeat the question? I'm sorry. All right, so you know who I am. I want to introduce myself, but the question was, thank you. The question was, I've asked at our forum a couple of weeks ago, the NAACP candidates forum at large. We asked the candidates if they support a civilian review board, why, and if they don't, why not a civilian review board with subpoena powers?
Thank you for that question. I know that we have a couple initiatives set forth currently through the city, and I know that there's a state review board as well. I'm not opposed to the idea of a civilian review board, but I would like to see our process that we currently have in place start first, and then reassess it from there. So I know that's a kind of a wishy-washy question, but we put a lot of work into creating what we have already, and I'd like to see that through in advance of jumping to something else at this time.
Okay, thank you. And the follow-up to that was, who do you imagine would be on the civilian board? Who do we choose? Whose voice gets heard?
Sure. I would, for me.
Shut it off.
Oh, mine's off. Hello, this is off.
All right, I think I'm on. I don't want to buzz anybody here. Maritza's got me all nervous. Honestly, I think that it's, people with lived experience. I think people in the mental health sector. I think women. I think veterans, persons of color. I think different. Each district has its own kind of identity, and I'd love to see it be representative of someone from each of those districts as well. But I think people who have, mental health background, trauma background, I think that would be really important to me.
Thank you. Do we have any?
I'll ask a question.
It's on now, that's for sure. I'm Shelley Rodman. I'm here tonight with the League of Women Voters. I read this morning in the Telegram about the City Council discussion regarding the composition of the school committee. And after, I'm sure everyone here knows, in the spring the City Council decided not to challenge the lawsuit. And then we've had months of closed-door conversations about how we were going to respond to the lawsuit about our school committee not being representative. So I wondered, 3 options were presented. I just wonder what each of you think of the 3 options, and also basically 1-month comment period for all of us in Worcester to say something about that. It feels like a very tight time frame given that elections are happening too, and lots of other things. So I'd like to hear what each of you think about those options and how we'll move forward.
Okay, so I'm okay with the 3 options. They all seem reasonable. The 4-week time period for me, for me, it feels like it's enough time. It's 4 weeks, it's a month. But this has been an ongoing discussion, right? So the outreach, the polling, the questioning, the conversation should have been done at this point. Because it has not been done, it falls on the council. They can get out there and knock doors and throw it in their GOTV or whatever it is they need to do to get the word out, but it's a done deal, so it just needs to move forward. Out of the 3, I don't know which one I would pick. They all sound great to me. But to bring the public in, it's too late. So just make them aware. This is what's happening. These are 3 choices. Maybe do a poll. These are 3 choices. Which one would you like? And choose from that, because it still shows inclusion. And it's not you not doing anything, right? But you have to do it in abundance. You have to utilize social media. You have to utilize word of mouth. You have to utilize the organizations that are out there on the forefront, right, to get this done. So that would be my approach, because it's only 4 weeks and it's a time crunch, but that's how you spread the word. That's how you get it out there, and that's how you get people involved and keep them informed as to what's going on. So thank you, Shelley. That was a great question.
Thank you, Shelley. That is a really good question, and I was on the record in the meeting saying that in my 2 terms, that was probably the saddest city council meeting that I've ever taken part in. It literally broke my heart. That should have been an 11-0 vote. It was voted in executive session 2. and Councilor Rivera recused herself, so that's why we have the number of 10 versus the number of 11. And when I talk about, our values being on the line, this is exactly what I mean. We have councilors who voted for this who were, on the record in council talking about, well, what expert's going to draw these lines? Maybe we should do a charter review. Or what tangible evidence do we have that supports that black and brown people are at a disadvantage in running for elected office? The timeline sure is tight. We've been talking about social equity and social injustice since George Floyd was murdered. We've been challenged for 400 years in this country. I think that we can move something forward so that people have a proper opportunity to rise up and run for an elected office in a way that makes, that they, I keep saying leveling the playing field. This is exactly what that does. And so for me, super disappointed. I thought it should have been an 11-0 vote. I was disappointed with some of the commentary. In terms of what option I like, I really like them all. I really just want to get it done. I'm really interested in learning and hearing from our constituency about, what their preferences are. If you know anything about me, I'm very pragmatic in my thinking, and I do my research and my homework, and I listen to people. I'm elected by the people and for the people, and so I'm anxious to hear what they have to say before I get really fully into, what I personally would like.
It is shocking to me that we didn't have a unanimous vote last night. And I look forward to seeing, I know that the plaintiffs have entered into a consent decree, have agreed to that. I look forward to seeing what they have to say, which option is the best for them moving forward, but agree with both Johanna and Councilor Rose that why is it that every single time we try to bring equity forward, why is it that every time we talk about racism, institutional racism, using the ARPA money for black and brown communities, why is it that this council or certain members of this council continue to block progress? I would like an answer from them as to why that is, because it's consistent and it is shameful and it is hurting communities that need to be at the forefront of leading our city.
Do we have any more questions?
Hi, I'm Nicole Foscola. My question for you all is, what is an issue specifically facing your district that you'd like to tackle over the next 2 years?
So my district is District 2, in case you didn't know. If you watch the city council meetings, or if you know anything about that district, you know that that district has a majority minority, okay? And a lot of the district, I say it's neglected. That's the only way I can put it. That's nice. It's a nicety. There are certain areas and neighborhoods that are very well kept and very well taken care of, but a lot of the district is not. And I mean, that's from trash on the streets and shopping carts to panhandlers on every corner to just having rundown properties. No time, money, or attention is invested into those neighborhoods. So that would be a big thing for me to do. I believe a neighborhood should reflect the people who live in it as a whole, not just certain neighborhoods, but a community, and I feel like if you live in a clean atmosphere, you take a little bit more pride in where you live at. But if the city is not investing in the money and funds to put into those neighborhoods, it's going to look how it looks. They need to hire more people for DPW and Parks and Recs, those kind of things. That needs to happen to create that kind of atmosphere, and it needs to be put out. I don't care if it's a mailer. Send it out, We're going to do a cleaning on this day. We want the neighborhood involved. We'll provide yellow trash bags. We'll provide gloves, but we want a neighborhood cleanup. whatever the case may be, the city can take those initiatives. There's money to do that. So if they did that, we would have clean atmosphere across the board, across the city, you know, not just in a district. We have to take pride in our cities. We say we do, but in some areas it doesn't show, and there's certain areas in my district that show that there's no care given.
Thank you, Nicole. It's really hard to pick one thing that you want to do or focus on. I think one of the newer things that have popped up in our district is food insecurity. We're seeing people really suffering and hurting, after the pandemic. And these are folks that are, there's this weird perception that everybody in District 1 is, well off or to do or whatever it may be, and that certainly isn't the case. If you consider District 1 as a pizza slice, it gets, when you're up in the Highland side, it's pretty affluent as you go down to Salisbury, Holden, Grove, and then when you get into, the Brattlestop area and Ararat Street, things really start to shift. And then you bookended by Lincoln Village and Great Brook Valley, and so there's a lot of diversity in the district. And what I'm seeing, or what I've seen since the pandemic, is that people are just really suffering from a food insecurity standpoint. Privileged to have the community fridge and Maria and Echo working with us, and privileged to have people like Carl Gomes in the district who are working with like Old Colony and some of the other folks, and Aaron Perner from the Universalist Church. But it is becoming a very, very difficult challenge for people as it relates to food. Quincy Community College has a food pantry. We have kids who are choosing books over meals. We really, really need to get ahead of this and work together to do that. And my goal is to really change that perception of District 1, right? That money's not growing on trees, and there's a lot of people out there that we need to take care of right now, and that's really my hope. And then there's, parks that are coming online and closing the deal on some things. I've been really balanced in my approach to provide, offering balanced resources around the district. Proud to report that Tacoma Street is getting a rectangular field and a spray park. Proud to report that Indian Hill on Ararat Street is coming online. It's a place where I lived with my daughters for like 13 years on those softball fields. And then to the art community and our young people in our cultural and arts community, we have 149 West Boylston Drive, which is just old kind of dank parcel that was sitting there, that we work with Representative John Mahoney to get an earmark to come down and get that cleared. We pay the state $1 a year for it, so it has to be soft recreation, so we're looking at some real art and culture happening around there, and it is one of the most beautiful sites on the lake. When you get to the edge of 149, you just look over the lake, and it's just really, really tremendous. So really excited about those things and completing those things. But I would say, Nicole, food insecurity is really sad, and we need to do more over there as it relates to that.
I did a walk audit with neighbors about 4 or 5 months ago around Mill Street area. We walked from the Coast Park playground all the way to Mill Swan, and that's because the number one thing that I've heard in District 5 is pedestrian safety, traffic, and children and elderly and pedestrians having narrowly escaped death from speeding cars and traffic that seems to be more and more aggressive. I think that in relation to that, Pleasant Street, June Street, Mill Street, those are all arteries that are very busy. I have talked about solutions that I think are implementable, traffic calming measures, making sure that our pedestrians and motorists are safe, our elderly, our seniors, our children walking, our pedestrians, bikers have all the ability to see the streets as safely for everyone. Streets need to be safe for both cars and people. I have talked about the meeting that was really heartbreaking at the West Etnic when parents and neighbors gotten together because a child had been hit getting off the car. My boy's age, and a crossing guard was just also hit on Pleasant Street, just waving and making sure that kids are walking safely. we talk about public safety. This is a huge public safety and public health issue, and I consider them both because I want our residents, whether they live in District 5, whether they live on Mill Street or Salisbury or the other parts of the city, to have a walkable city. We talk about Worcester being a green city. We talk about Worcester being a walkable city. We talk about Worcester being a city that has good transportation. I see those things as interrelated. I see the fight around having a connected WRTA as part of this conversation. And I'm going to break the rules and bring a second issue because I think it's very important to me. And that is that we also have a lot of vacant properties, whether that's the Big D on Mill Street, properties that have gone out of business around Park Ave. I have heard from neighbors that in addition to traffic and safety, that's been an issue on their minds. What are we going to do with those properties? What kind of incentives are we going to use to make sure that we are building for neighbors, not for outside people? Making sure that all of our communities, all of our residents in the district are included in those community planning decision-making processes. And if elected, I want to work really hard to make sure that both those things happen. I have all the other issues, but you only asked for one.
Yes, thank you. We have another question.
I'm going to try to ask a question that's not quite fully worked out in my mind. At the NAACP candidate forum, every counselor, every candidate said that they listen to their constituents. It is easy to listen to people who talk in ways that are familiar to you. It's easy to listen to people who signal that they are of your community or tribe or whatever. And I've had one-to-ones with folks who consider themselves progressive, but object when a resident or a citizen or an organizer demonstrates anger or frustration, emotion, because it makes it hard to hear the logic of what it's hard to hear it's hard to take perspective, I guess. So I know that two of you are not yet counselors. Councilor Rose, you are. I guess I am just asking you to respond to that concern, how it resonates with you, and what you do as a counselor. I know, Johanna, you've talked a lot about reaching out to folks in the community. Have you had an opportunity, or you have ever had the experience when somebody has demonstrated anger or frustration, and you have responded by seeking more information from them?
How do you deal with the difficult questions, with the difficult people, or with the difficult perspective that does not line up with your version?
Thank you. That's a good question. I just had the situation happen to me last week, and I was out knocking doors, and I knocked on a police officer's door. It was funny. I don't want to call him out, so I won't. But he was outside, and it was a spectacle. So we approached anyways, because I know you're in a bad mood, but maybe I can brighten your day, right? So I approached anyways, and we started having a conversation, and he said, I'm not voting for anyone who's not pro-police. So automatically he assumed that I was not pro-police. I'm not, but I'm not against them either, I just don't like people who abuse their authority, right? So I wanted his perspective and why he felt like that and why he thought like that about me already, because it's not on any platform. Not on any of my platforms, or have you ever heard me say, I am not pro-police, right? I am anti-abuse of authority. And he was already angry, mind you. So I just wanted to hear what he had to say. And, you know, he went on a tangent about Maine South and all that, and I understood where he was coming from as a police officer. But as a police officer of color, I didn't understand. So that's why I wanted to stay and have a conversation with him. I spent 25 minutes talking to him and his wife about their stance and why. And at the end of the day, I walked away. He took my palm card. So we made up and we kissed and we made nice. And he understood where I stood and I understood where he stood. Bottom line was, he's a police officer. His is factual, based on law and law alone and nothing else. If you're a criminal, you're a criminal. And I could understand that.
But did that perspective did you take that perspective in your future consideration of that issue?
I did, to an extent, because I also come from a household with a DEA agent. So I seen where he was coming from. And when I say we walked away with a common respect for each other and where we stood. I'm still against abuse of authority, and he still feels like he's solid in his stance, but we have an understanding. So we didn't walk away in anger. And not, thank you.
I think I'm okay. I'm so nervous with this microphone. Oh man, like what? I don't know what I'm doing here. You know, 26 years in the field of mental health and education. People can yell at me all they want, and I can certainly see, or read through, what they're trying to convey or communicate to me. I think that we're such a big city, right? Districts represent 36,000 people with a new census. We're up to 40,000 each. I spoke to you about the diversity of our district, so the needs are different, right? So on Saxon Road, we have a real issue with Beaver Brook and runoff coming into basements there, where it might be. Where it might be a little bit different in Great Brook Valley or Lincoln Village. It might be incredibly different in Upper Burncoat and Greendale. And so I think that the first thing that you have to do is recognize where, what that community, what that neighborhood needs are. We have 8 neighborhood meetings in our district. We have one of the most active constituencies from a voting standpoint. We rival, 1 in 5 rival each other, but 1 in 5 have more voters individually than 2, 3, and 4 combined. So we want more people paying attention, but these are the people who are arguably paying some of the most attention. And I think the thing for me is always just recognizing that their issue, it's easy to make excuses, like speed on my streets, and it's like, well, good luck. We have 500 miles of road in the city and 100 miles in the district. Like, your problem isn't any different than anyone else's. Is not the response that you want to give to them. I think just recognizing and reading the room and understanding where they're from. And I draw a lot of parallels to myself. I grew up on a fixed income, with a single mom of 4 who had her first kid at 16 years old. We moved around to the 13, 14 different towns before I was in 7th grade. We grew up hungry at times, and so I feel like I have a good sense of my own, in my professional life and my personal life, really being a thoughtful, educated person around what's happening in the different neighborhoods, being present to these neighborhood meetings, give me a good perspective on what the needs are and what the challenges are there. So call me and yell at me all you want.
That's okay. Call and yell at me all you want. That's okay. In the end, I'm going to be committed to finding that common ground. And I think that that's the most important thing, is recognizing what the needs are and addressing it in a way. And there are also times where we have to tell people bad news, right? And delivering that in a way that is very thoughtful. That's what I was focusing on.
So you asked about active listening, and I started my career as a community mediator, in small claims court, and then I transitioned to teaching young kids in our Worcester Public Schools and Boston Public Schools about conflict resolution. And one of the most valuable and wise things that I have been taught by my parents and by my culture, but also what I imparted on my boys and on the youth that I mentored, is that we cannot walk away from conversations because we feel angry or because we feel a certain way. As an activist, I'm used to that, pushing boundaries and making people mad. I think at the end of any day, what's underneath that anger and frustration is pain. It's pain that we're not at a place where we can have conversations with compassion. It's that we're not being heard. At least that's what I experience from the people that express anger. And I don't want to police people's emotions, ever. I am committed to listening with intent, with compassion. And as you saw in some of the organizing that we've been doing, whether a city councilor calls because they got mad about something I put on Facebook, we may end the conversation with, we'll agree to disagree. But next time, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to have a conversation with you. We cannot get stuck in our separate corners and not have conversations and not understand that our lives are rooted in so much nuance and complexity. And I have a lot of compassion for people who come to the table with those emotions. I don't think we should be afraid of conflict. I think it's an opportunity for us to recreate, to reimagine how we relate to each other and how we relate to the communities that are mostly hurting right now. And as committed, I'm not a perfect person, but at least I do want to make the commitment as I tell my boys that we need to always come from a place of compassion and intent to build and not destroy.
Thank you. And thank you to our audience for providing those important and thought-provoking questions. We're now going to move to closing statements. As a reminder, you have 90 seconds, and we'll start with Attell.
We'll actually give them 2 minutes.
Oh, you have 2 minutes. Surprise.
Well, I had some prepared. I had some prepared remarks because I was tired and needed something to help me. But let me just talk to you from my heart. This has been a very difficult year for a lot of people. In my daily work, I work with homeless families, and my office is located in one of our shelters. There isn't a day that goes by where I don't think about the kids that I see on the footsteps of our work. There's not a day that goes by where I don't ask myself the why I'm doing and why I want to do what I do. And I am very clear about the why and the purpose that I have in mind, and that is that I want to serve. I want to serve beyond the normal definition of serving, and that what that means for me is that I want to build a pathway for other people who will come beyond me if I am elected. I don't think that people don't have a voice. I think that people need the table to be made bigger. People need the doors to be open so that they can express what they need, their hopes and dreams and frustrations. I'm running for District 5 because I like serving people, is what I did. It's what I've done my entire life that I've lived in the United States. I'm grateful for the opportunity to take this journey with my children. I'm grateful to the team. I have been hurt by a lot of negativity that's been hurled my way. But as we talked about, I see that as an opportunity to build a better example. As leaders, we lead with integrity, with positivity, with patience, and with the ability to talk to all people, regardless of whether we agree or disagree with them. At least that's what I have in my heart and my soul. I hope that the voters of District 5 will elect me on November 2nd. If elected, it's easy to make promises. I think that my commitment is and always will be to the people, to listen, to act, to organize with, and most importantly, to make sure that we're building a city for all people, not just a few.
Thank you. So I'm very minute if possible to, I'm just going to hold it right here. if possible, to answer the questions that I missed. So as it relates to the question from the NAACP, I think that the COVID disparity study from UMass is an excellent blueprint on how we should be using those ARPA funds. I think we have our CHIP, our Community Health Improvement Plan. We don't need to reinvent anything to work on behalf of for these funds. I think that we already have some things already in the pipeline that we could use and do some strategic planning around it, dedicating some funding to that. And then as it relates to the question from the League of Women Voters, I think you got me here. I'm the Vice Chair of Economic Development. I'm on the Vice Chair of Traffic and Parking. I'm Chair of the Parks Committee. So you kind of hit all of those things in that question. Walkability is important to me. I just put something on related to walkability in our schools. A lot of people think it's a mile that one has to walk to get to school. It's actually 2 miles. And so if you were to put your finger on any one of our schools and do a 2-mile circumference of that, I can guarantee you it's not walkable for our young people. And we really need to do something to address that and different walkability studies in and around the district. And so, you know, potholes, those things, there was at one point I was personally putting in so many potholes that our former Assistant Commissioner, Matt Lebovitis, said, you are going to break our system, you need to knock it off. So it's the streets, sidewalks, those are the things that people see and feel immediately. And I put stuff up that's been shot down using some of our unused tax levy. We have $110 million in streets that are scheduled to be repaired that have been on that list for dozens and dozens and dozens of years. We need to figure out a way to chip away at that in a very thoughtful way. And I think using some of our unused tax levy around that is a smart way to do it because there's precedence and it's happened before. All right. So finally, you know, I'm a career advocate. I love being an advocate. I love supporting vulnerable populations, marginalized populations, and just being the answer to improving the quality of life of others. But in the mental health field and education, like I said, for over 26 years. I feel like over the last 4 years, I've been doing and working really hard to bring people together and educating people to really find common ground. I think that there are times where people, some of my criticisms, like, you know, like you're slow moving or you're too pragmatic, and I'm very thoughtful in bringing people together in and around that. I was the only counselor to offer office hours throughout the pandemic, and I think we did nearly 80 some odd hours of that, just, you know, checking in with constituents and making sure that they were okay and that they had everything that they needed. And I've always been told that, you know, a good or a great city councilor is somebody who isn't an expert in one thing, right? That they're an expert in partnering with people and bringing people together, and that's really what I strive to do and what I hope to continue to strive to do in my third term. We have a sound fiscal budget that I anticipate is going to be very fruitful at the end of this fiscal year. We have federal funds, we have ARPA funds, we have social justice reforms, we have equity assessments, we have development, we have food insecurity. I think this is a tremendous opportunity to not just band-aid things and be reactive to things, but actually proactively, and I know people throw that word around all the time. Like I said, we have the CHIP, we have assessments coming up. These are all things that can inform our practice. I like to use data because it takes all the emotion out of things, and it's tangible and something for us to be able to use to develop policy practice and push resources towards. And you know, we need someone who isn't a one-sided thinker. We need someone who isn't about one particular department in our city. We need somebody who's going to bring people together and speak for all people, all residents, all departments, and keep our progress going. Keeping this one-sided approach or this opinionated approach or lack of an educated approach is really going to stall the progress that we've made. And so I humbly ask for your vote on November 2nd so I can continue to bring people together and continue to advance the city. Thank you.
All right, so like Etel and Sean, I guess I too am in the business of dealing with people. And my day-to-day, my 9 to 5, I work for UHealth Solutions. We are a nonprofit that is contracted by the Executive Offices of Health and Human Services and the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. So I deal a lot with doing referrals and directing people to get what they need, whether it's in-home services, Meals on Wheels, a PCA or a home health aid, whether it's questions about their Medicare because they're turning 65 and they don't know what to do, you know, just dealing in resources. And I plan on applying those skills that I have for resources and directing people to my job as a city councilor, because that's a lot of what's missing, is pointing people in the right direction to where they can find those resources, no matter what it is. If you are a councilor in the city, you should know where the resources are at. So if somebody is calling you for something, you need to be able to direct them in the right direction. I plan on giving it my all, putting everything of me into it. I also have a son who's 23 who has a disability. He was born with sickle cell disease, so he spends a lot of time in and out the hospital, so very familiar with hospital settings and their processes. So, you know, just being able to relate to people in a real way, on a real wavelength, and understand. I can understand standing in the line for a food pantry. Why? Because I've been there. You know, I can understand reaching out to Central Mass Housing Alliance because I need help with rent. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a normal person. I don't supersede, I'm not above anybody. So when I say I have real conversations with real people, these are the conversations that I'm having. You know, somebody needs Pampers for their baby. They can't get it. I know there's a resource online. You know, mutual aid is there. Who to reach out to. I can put you in touch with any one of the admins, the village, you know what I mean? They're very helpful. There are a lot of things and a lot of resources in the city that don't get enough shine, and people don't know what their resources are. It's my job as a city councilor to give them those resources and to guide them. I don't want to be the voice like you tell. I'm not the voice. I'll be your microphone. I will help you amplify 10 times over. We will get the message out loud and clear, and that's my goal. Just directing funds where they need to go so that organizations that are already established and new ones upcoming can help reach and support more people, because that's what it comes down to, is the people. So I also ask you humbly with a little giggle to please make sure you're voting right on November 2nd. I might not be that polished diamond, but I'm getting there. You know what I mean? But I will not leave you out in the cold, and I will not ignore you. I will always fight for people, period. Thank you.
So thank you all for being here with us and for this most important community forum. And that's an important word, community forum, because we are about community here in our city. And I like to believe that when people do run for public office, they're here to serve our community as a whole. So on behalf again of our partners in the YWCA, Black Families Together, on behalf of Leon, which is a Latino Empowerment Organizing Network, on behalf of the League of Women Voters Worcester area, on behalf of Massachusetts Women of Color Coalition, MAWOC, on behalf of the NAACP-Worcester chapter, and on behalf of the Voter Registration Initiative Group, I thank you for being here with us. I thank the candidates for showing up and being present. Some of you may have noticed that we do have some individuals who are running for office. We invited, and an invitation was extended to all. And so we did leave the name placards up because we had no clue if they were going to be here or not, since we didn't get a response. So thank you for showing up. And thank you, the community, for showing up also. When you show up, you're holding accountability. And that's most important. That's our responsibility to do so. So it is the YWCA USA's and the YWCA Central Mass mission to get out the vote. You have heard the candidates, and now it's your responsibility